For our next speaker, I'm sure everyone is very familiar with this gentleman who at one time was also USTMAAA president in 2000. Boy, sorry, was he USTMAAA president? But anyway, Boy at one point was USTMAAA president 2013? 12. Oh, that was 10 years ago. But anyway, Dr. Abay is a USD graduate, of course, class 73. Let's give him a... I know Dr. Abay way back when I was an intern because he was kind enough. I did my internship at University of Kansas, Wichita. So that was the first time I met Dr. Abay. And believe me or not, my personal experience is the kindest man I ever met. I was an intern. I came here, I had nothing. And Dr. Abay and Mrs. Abay, Emily, opened their house and let me stay. For free. Thank you, boy. I'll be forever. Emily, thank you. I'll be forever grateful. Thank you. But Dr. Abay, you guys know, had finished med school in '73, had a master's in science in neurosurgery at the Mayo Clinic, Mayo Graduate School of Medicine, University of Minnesota, way back in 1982. He has been voted a top neurosurgeon in Wichita, Kansas by the healthcare providers for 2005 and 2006. He was also listed on the top 10 most influential people in healthcare by the Wichita Business Journal magazine in 2006. He was the most outstanding, he received the most outstanding alumnus award by the Ateneo Association of Former Resident Students back in 2017 and in 2019. Dr. Abay was voted the most outstanding alumnus by the USTMAAA. And of course, he is currently a full professor of neurosurgery and a chair, faculty professional development program. He's the course director in neuroscience, the Kansas Health Science Center, Kansas College of Osteopathic Medicine in Wichita, Kansas. Without much ado, let me introduce Dr. Abay. Let's welcome him. Thank you, Dr.
You know, I have a phobia with having the microphone and another thing in my right hand. It reminds me of a former anatomy professor who had a model of the tongue and the throat on one hand and the microphone on the other. And he would begin to talk, and inadvertently he would put the tongue in front of it. And anyway, my challenge this morning is I have about 6 months of material to put into what I intend to be a 30-minute talk. The second challenge is, it's going to be a difficult topic to get through. And then my wife added to the challenge. She said, 1/3 to half of your audience will be seniors. Half of them will not hear you. And with due respect, understanding is one thing. Your consolation is, after you're done with your talk, half of them will forget everything. Well, thank you, Dr. Payawa and Dr. Ko, for the talk this morning. They were appropriate prelude to my talk. When Dr. Ko gave her talk, my wife looked at me again and asked me, "Do you have absence Sishu?" And when Dr. Payawa was giving his talk, she kept looking at me because she's scheduled to undergo knee replacement surgery on June 20. So thank you for preparing her, Doctor. Yeah. But let me begin. First, forward is the middle button. Okay. No. There we go. Everybody see that? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, you know. Well, let me read it to you. Number one, graduate and postgraduate education is, including medical school, that is. Number one, or letter A, pedagogy. Letter B, andragogy. C, demagogy. D, all of the above. All right. Number two, at best, audience subject retention after 30 days of lectures by the most effective experts and speaker is A, 90%, B, 70%, C, 50%, and D, 20%. All right. And the third question, flipped classroom teaching provides A, show and tell learning, B, teacher-directed learning, C, interactive learning, and D, self-directed learning. All right. So the objectives for this morning's talk are, number one, at the end of this presentation, hopefully, you will be able to apply and implement principles of andragogy versus pedagogy in teaching. Two, effectively use the flipped classroom using mainly case-based collaborative learning, CBCL. Three, the use of interactive methods to promote long-term memory of students in the science of learning. Four, inspire and motivate students to develop and apply good lifelong critical thinking and self-study habits. And the reason for this is with all the technology and the development in science and technology, a third to half of what we learn today in the journals will be proven wrong in the future. And finally, to develop empathy for patients and a passion for the art and science of medicine. So I have nothing to declare. By way of introduction, as physicians, we cannot not teach. As a practicing physician, or even as an academic physician, we interact with patients, the patient's family, the community, the society as a whole, our professions and co-professionals, and then the academics. And we cannot not teach. Part of all this interaction is medical education. We need to educate our patients' families, our community, and we need to keep up with advances in medicine and technology. So what do we want our medical students to learn as teachers in med school? Of course, we want them to learn the core basic and clinical knowledge and information necessary to practice good medicine. 2, we need them to develop critical thinking, not just take whatever is told them or given to them, hook, line, and sinker, but to analyze, understand, and question whatever they're taught. We want them to develop lifelong self-study skills, and for the reasons I've given you earlier. We need them to develop sincere empathy and passion for patients and their families. And then finally, the passion for art and science of medicine. So, the very first concept is away with grades. When I first proposed this to many teachers 15 years ago, they looked at me with aghast. What? Do away with grades? Well, the reason is, because of grades, competition in med school is stiff. To the point that some students, to get ahead, actually put down other students. It was my personal experience in residency. My senior residents actually tried to put me down to get ahead. It's just part of having grades. So we have admonished just a pass or fail grade. In fact, our medical school has adopted this. We only have pass or fail grades. There are no numerical grades, although they can request for their grades if they want to. Okay. The reason for that is the pass or fail grade encourages teamwork. The students tend to work together to pass, and they tend to help the ones that are struggling. And also, the pass or fail grade has not only been adopted by many of the foremost medical schools in the US, even the national boards have adopted this. They no longer give you grades. They tell you you pass or you fail. But you can request for your grade if you want to. So andragogy versus pedagogy. Well, andragogy was coined by Alexander Knapp way back in 1833. He was a phys ed educator in Europe and developed this in coaching students, adults, the need for this term, andragogy. It was popularized, however, by an American psychologist and educator, Malcolm Knowles, in the USA. Now, adult learning is basically andragogy, and child learning is pedagogy. So this is Malcolm Knowles, and he proposed that adults are internally motivated and self-directed. They go there because they want to learn. Second, adults bring life experiences and knowledge to learning. They bring them with them their entire lifetime experience in the process of learning. Adults are goal-oriented. They know what they want, and they know what they want to learn and take home. They want what they learn to be relevant. They are practical, and they like to be respected. So contrasting pedagogy against andragogy, pedagogy is formal, andragogy tend to be informal and cooperative. Learners in pedagogy are dependent and directed by the teacher, whereas in andragogy, learners are independent and self-directed. In pedagogy, learning is put upon them, and in andragogy, the students learn what they think is relevant to their lives. Evaluation is external in pedagogy. They are dependent on the teacher's drive and results in tests and grades. Whereas in andragogy, it's mostly self-assessment. Further, the students in pedagogy tend to be inexperienced. They're learning subject-oriented, and they're extrinsically motivated by grades. And most of us, unfortunately, were educated this way through med school. In andragogy, the students are experienced. They're learning problem-oriented, and they're intrinsically motivated. So this is David Kolb, another concept about adult education. He died about 5 years ago. He's another psychologist, and he proposed this experiential learning theory. Anyone who undergoes an experience tend to reflect about the experience. Then he develops, or she develops, concepts about the experience. And then whatever lessons he or she learns, he or she experiments and applies to life. It is, in fact, a continuum. While we always think it begins with a concrete experience, it can begin anywhere, and the cycle proceeds. So it's a continuous process of perception and processing. The third gentleman I'd like you to remember is Albert Bandura, who is another psychologist. Now, he died about 2 years ago. He proposed and forwarded the social cognitive theory. Observing children in an orphanage, he noted that the children who were subjected to harsh punishment for what they did tended to interiorize the experience, and as they grew up and matured, carried these experiences with them and actually behaved what they went through, as they went through. So depending upon whether they were rewarded or punished, he proposed that what people observe, people learn. So the other theory is, and it's a fact actually, students have one or two or more ways of learning styles. We have people who learn more visually, people who hear and learn better, and those who'd rather read and write, and those that must actually do things to learn. And some people have just the one major component, others have all. When we teach, we have to understand that our students may vary. Some may be visual, others may be auditory, and still others may be actually kinesthetic or require reading and writing. So we must use all these methods. Then there are the generational differences. By definition, I only have 5 minutes. By definition, a generation is a group of people born around the same time and raised around the same place. People who, of the same generation, exhibit similar characteristics, preferences, values, attitudes, and experiences. So, looking at the different generations, our teachers call themselves the greatest generation, but they are the traditionalists. We, most of us, the baby boomers, think we are the best generation, however. Then there is the Generation X, and then the millennials, which comprise most of our students in med school today. Then, of course, the ones that are yet to come. So, the key shaping factors in generations and the differences in generations are mainly parental, technology, and the experience they go through. So the traditionalists, were raised by traditional parents. They experienced depression, World War II, started and actually saw the start of civil rights movements. And then in technology, the beginnings of the moving picture, the cars, in the US TV did not come to Asia and the Philippines until perhaps the 60s, if you remember. And then the values. The traditionalists adhere to rules, they're hard worker, they're loyal, and duty before pleasure. And the baby boomers, well, you know yourselves. Well, we experienced the Cold War, Vietnam, and we saw the first man on the moon. And then from the 8mm films, we now have our digital. We don't even need cassettes anymore. All we need is our cell phones. Then we learned anti-war movements and the equal right movements as well, and so forth. Our focus, however, is this last generation on the board, the millennials that comprise most of our students in med school. They are usually raised by parents we call helicopters. You know what they are. These parents are over the children and what happens to them in school. They demand things from the teacher. They are experiencing internet. They went through the 9/11. They grew up with technology and essentially are savvy technologists. They're confident, they're entitled, they have a global community. No longer are people divided by country lines or borders. They're techno-savvy. In fact, when I get stalled in my computer, I go to the students for help. And then they're avid consumers. Now they want to experience now. Never mind tomorrow, never mind yesterday. I want it now. So, as teachers, what do millennials expect? Well, they demand high quality, technically proficient, student-centered learning. They want efficient use of their time. They want immediate feedback. They want a say in a place at the table and how things proceed. And then they want faculty who are invested in their success and help them get on the right career path. So it is imperative as teachers that we know our students. If we don't, we are misled. We may be teaching them the wrong things or using the wrong techniques. So this brings us to Bloom's taxonomy. So to those who are teachers, this is not new. This again was developed by another psychologist in a group of teachers convention. He developed this pyramid. So at the very bottom are the first steps in learning, which is remembering what is read or taught. And then, of course, the key is understanding. My pointer quit. Here we go. I'm not pressing it right. My IT expert is looking at me. And then the top 4 tiers are the key tiers which we want our students to be involved in. We want them to apply, analyze, evaluate information, and then create their own. So, the key component of the current education is what we call the flipped classroom. So what is the flipped classroom? Well, we have traditionally a lecture setup where we have the teacher in front and the students simply listen. We all went through these through our first 2 years in med school. Well, the flipped classroom really is where this setup is flipped. Activity is centered in the students, where they interact with each other, and they need a pre-work to prepare for that classroom work, and then the teacher simply supervises the students. They found that using this approach, students learn better and remember better. The logistics of flipping, in the old, we have students read materials before coming to class, if they do. And then we have in the classroom the lecture, the traditional lecture, where the professor essentially gives them what they need to learn. And then after that, they're given homework or things to do. In the new setup, students are given pre-work. They're given assignments or readings or videos to watch to learn what may be taken up in the class activity. In the actual classroom, instead of the lecture, the students go into discussion in teams, and the teacher simply supervises. It is application of what they prepared for in their pre-work. Then after class, they're encouraged to research or learn further or apply what they know and create new applications for what they've learned. So the key to the flipped classroom is the instructors need to engage the students even before class by giving them the proper pre-work that is relevant, and then give them the opportunity to apply this in the class, and then challenge them to further study after class and apply what they learn and create new things. So the Bloom's taxonomy, is it blurred? Maybe it's your eyes. But the classroom is flipped. So before class, the students are given pre-work to remember and understand, and during class they apply and analyze what they learned, and then after class they do further evaluation and creating their own applications. So with this, we have begun to use these. We've used problem-based learning, where students are given a problem to solve. Now, in the problem-based learning, a problem is given or proposed. The student uses what he has in the past to address the problem and solve the problem, and then even perhaps create new application and then resolve the problem. In so doing, when a case is presented to the student in PBL, a problem-based learning, he uses his or her past experiences to apply to the problem. In the process of doing this, it enhances the learning process, and it allows the student to apply what he or she has learned. Then transfer all this learning in subsequent problems he or she will meet. Then came the team-based learning. To add to the PBL, where it's mainly individual, in team-based learning, now we have 4 individuals or more come together, apply their individual processes, and then interact with each other, which allows a better exchange and interaction of learning. And then the faculty simply supervises. So the learning is better this way. In the typical TBL, and those who apply it, the students do the IRAT, which is their preparation, and then they do the TRAT, which is the team learning, where they exchange ideas amongst themselves, and then they present it to the whole group. So, what is case-based collaborative learning, or CBCL? Now, this was actually developed by the Harvard Med School. In case-based collaborative learning, they actually took the best from PBL and TBL and put them and applied them to the collaborative effort. So, using both PBL and TBL in CBL, not only do the students apply what they've learned the night before, they are encouraged to apply everything they've experienced in the past to apply to the problem. And then in class, they individually work on the problem. They're divided into teams, and each one presents to the team. The team members then develop a consensus, and then the team develops their answers to the solutions to the problem. And then the team are asked to present to the class, and further discussion is carried on. So it is theory applied to practice. The key component of CBCL is the pre-work. It is most important that the student do the pre-work. If they do not do the pre-work, then everything is lost. So the students are given, usually we allow a 30 minute to an hour work for pre-work so that they will be prepared for the discussion. And then in class, the case is presented, and here is the key. Each student individually works and write down his approach to the problem. They're given time to work on the problem individually, and then within the team, each member of the class present to the team, and the team interact together to develop a consensus. The team, in turn, rotates among themselves to elect a presenter, which will present, or who will present to the entire group, which will carry further discussion and elaboration on the subject. So this is basically a repetition of the same. So we allow 15 minutes for the introduction of the case and individual work, 20 to 30 minutes for the group discussion, and then finally another 10 or 20 minutes for discussion of the key points, and then finally discussion of the case in the entire class. So where have the lectures failed? Well, not that it has failed. In fact, we're doing it now. I have to present a lecture. And we hope that you will retain more than 20%. But the problem is, while we pick the best speakers and the best experts, it doesn't guarantee learning by the students. Research have shown that after a lecture, learners are unable to retrieve abstract knowledge needed to resolve real-world problems or application of the theories. In fact, if we look at a lecture the current lecture setup, if you will see, every student has a laptop with them. In medical school now, when we have a lecture or a presentation, they all have an individual laptop in front of them. After 10, 15 minutes, I go back and watch and see. What do you see? Some people are going shopping, watching some family pictures, doing chats or talk. So their attention span is small, and they do not listen to the talk anymore. So this is a study done by TV, in an association of TV broadcasters, trying to define how long their advertisement should be. They found that the average human used to have 12 seconds attention span in 2000. In 2013, it's now 2023, mind you, it's gone down to 8 seconds. The goldfish has a 9-second attention span. Well, the fact is, well, this is the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. In reality, Ebbinghaus was another psychologist, a German psychologist, in fact, and he studied the retention of students after a lecture or presentation. If you look at this, the percent is on the left, and then the elapsed time of learning on the axis. Immediate recall is good, but after 19 minutes, it goes down to less than 60%. After 63 minutes, an hour, it's down to 45%. After 31 days, well, guess what? 20%. So, unfortunately, studies after studies have confirmed this finding. So how can we as teachers fight the forgetting curve? So, in neurology, we talk about short-term and long-term memory, an encouragement to us seniors. The brain is a wonderful organ. You know, it controls everything. And in an entire lifetime, we have about 200 billion neurons in the brain. Most neuroscientists say that in our entire lifetime, we only use 10% of these neurons. So there's a lot to reserve. So in memory, the short-term memory is usually what we get in visual or acoustic learning, and it's encoded, and it's usually automatic, and it's limited to only 5 to 9 items, and it's stored in short term. All right. After a period of time, we may retain 10 or 20% of it. In long-term memory, however, the application of knowledge or information and in association of many things, the individual's past experiences, in addition to tactile experiences, create engrams and connections and association, which create what we call the long-term memory, which is what we would like to apply now in medical school education. So, again, for those of you who are further interested, I would like to have you look at, this reference, Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast or Slow, where he talks about the short-term and long-term memory. The system one, which is short-term, is faster, it's a pattern recognition, it is intuitive and automatic, but it's short-term. In system two, learning is a slower process. It requires effort. We have to make an effort to use or interact with the information and be analytical and it's voluntary. And we create the long-term memory process. So, again, research after research have shown that the passive methods of teaching, which is mainly the lectures and so forth, we have, on the average, a 10 to 20% retention rate after 30 days. Whereas the participatory, interactive teaching methods have resulted in 50 to 90% retention. So again, the great resource, Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning by Drs. Brown, Rudiger, and McDaniel, something you may want to look at. They have developed the 6 techniques of active learning and cognitive learning. And they have sternly and strongly advocated that the brain must work to have the learning stick. So when learning is easy, it's superficial and forgotten. Effortful learning, on the other hand, changes the brain and it makes new connections. So learning takes work, and application or transfer of knowledge also requires work. So the six strategies or techniques that they propose is space retrieval practice or quizzing, interleaving, generation, elaboration, reflection, and calibration. So space retrieval practice is quizzing. After a class session, we quiz the student to help them retain. In the class itself, we give a quiz, Oops. We give a quiz. And then, a day later, we ask them to recall again the knowledge. A week later, or 3 days later, we may give them a reminder to look at the subject again, and requiz after 6-7 days or later. And then the second technique is interleaving. They have proposed, whereas when we learn our basic sciences, we learn anatomy, physiology, by themselves and in isolation, they propose that it is better to interleave the topics. So the different topics are put together in correlation with other topics, and in fact interleaved with the other topics. And it is repeated in subsequent class session. The third is generation. Solving a problem before they're given the answer. So students are given, the students are given the problem, and they're asked to solve the problems by themselves. Then they're asked to interact with each other before they're given the actual answer. Then elaboration. The fact that they've gone through this and have learned the process does not necessarily mean that they have learned the subject. So it is necessary for them to repeat or teach a co-student or to be able to retain and become masters of the subject. And then reflection. To help learners, they must relate material to their prior knowledge or past experiences, then encourage them to teach each other to further elaborate their knowledge. Students have found, and we have found this too, as we teach, we find gaps in our knowledge. When we teach, we learn more and become truly masters of the subject with repetition. Reflection. We review what we have learned, and we try to apply what we've learned, and give each other feedback in the reflection of what we've done. And then finally, again, more references. Finally, calibration. It is important that the students must try to understand perception versus reality. Many times we think we got it, but we haven't got it. It's what we think we know, we don't. So we may think we fully understand the subject, but we don't. Repeated application and explanation of the teaching subject to a classmate or a colleague or to the class reinforces the knowledge and points to gaps. Then mastery requires critical thinking, self-study, and interactive learning. It is not enough that we interacted with each other and learn the current subject. We need to look further and learn more. Adult motivation is the key to learning with adult education. So, in summary again, the 6 techniques and strategies for learning and for long-term memory are self-retrieval, quizzing, interleaving, generation, elaboration, reflection, and calibration. So, how much time do we have? Okay. Here's a case scenario. A 45-year-old woman with history of tobacco use, 30-pack years, stage 3B, non-small cell lung cancer, status post chemo radiation therapy 3 months ago, presents with acute onset right-sided chest pain and dyspnea. Her symptoms began suddenly. She never had symptoms like this before. On examination, temperature was 100.1, heart rate was 120 beats per minute, blood pressure was 146/82, respiration was 26, and O2 SOT was 79%, or 97%. My wife tells me I'm dyslexic. On exam, it's noted that the patient is in moderate distress. You hear S1, S2, tachycardia on auscultation, no crackles or wheezing, no other positive findings. What is the most likely cause of her symptom? A, acute coronary syndrome. B, aortic dissection. C, pneumonia. D, pulmonary embolism. And E, COPD exacerbation. Okay. So, your answer is that. And why did you choose that? That's the harder question too. So, again, back to the question. In fact, the patient had pulmonary embolism because of the patient's history and so forth. So compare that with the same history given to the students. Again, the physical exam and the findings, and they're given the diagnosis. So, which is better in learning? So, back to the pyramid. We have the bottom portion of the pyramid and the upper tier, which we'd like to emphasize in teaching. So, whereas in the lectures in the past, we have a sage on stage, in the new approach, we have the guide on the side. Adult learning theory In pedagogy, we have the teacher giving to the students, whereas in andragogy, we have the students interacting with each other. So back again to the learning theory. In our med school and what we propose and what we would like to advocate, in the past we learned the basic science isolatedly. Okay. We now integrate the basic and clinical science in our teaching from day one. This allows them to see why the basic science is important and how they can use the basic science in the clinical practice. So in learning basic science skills, traditionally we have the teacher teaching, we have them memorize things, and we have them regurgitate it back. Whereas the new approach, it's self-directed, self-motivated, it's an integrated approach, basic and clinical science, and again, critical thinking. So with the lectures, again, the flipped classroom, with new technology, and laboratory, we'd like to have an applied approach. Many medical schools don't have live cadavers now. They use computerized models. And in fact, it helps prepare them because it helps them understand anatomy better, and in the applied sciences of radiology and clinical evaluation, they're able to relate anatomy and physiology to the clinical setting. So again, to remind you of the CBCL, we also use a lot of simulation. In the first 2 years, we have, in fact, models of a senior patient, an adult, a newborn, and a baby that they can actually work on physically. And they are video. We have 2 cameras in each room. We observe students do the actual clinical examinations. And we also pay actors to act as patients to provide the patient and the students actual practice and stimulation. So, in addition to this, of course, in our 3rd and 4th year, we give them clinical rotations. And we have contracted with an artificial intelligence company to help us apply the new applications of artificial intelligence in learning. All right, I'm sorry. Well, that said, I just want to be sure that I do not forget the art of empathy in our teaching. We need to... Anatoly Broyard, New York Times essayist, before he died of prostatic cancer, lamented, "I just wished that his doctor, would brood on my situation for perhaps 5 minutes, that he would give me his whole mind, just once, be bonded with me for a brief space, survey my soul as well as my flesh, to get at my illness. For each man is ill in his own way. Just as he orders blood tests and bone scans of my body, I'd like my doctor to scan me, to grope for my spirit as well as my prostate. Without such recognition, I am nothing but my illness." So in summary, we need to have a new approach to teaching our students. And we have our objectives, and we go back to our pre-test. Graduate and postgraduate education is, of course, andragogy. At best, audience retain after 30 days of a lecture, at best, 20%. The flipped classroom teaching provides show and tell. It's actually a little of all, but mainly interactive learning. So, to end, Dr. Greg Tan and Dr. Primo Andres, I have 4 cardiologists here in front and many more in the back. They say cardiology is exciting, but neurology is boring. I say no. Well, the heart is elegant, it moves, you know. You see it beat, pump blood throughout the body. But the brain also moves. This is an actual MRI of a patient. So the brain moves. But Greg tells me this movement is also caused by the heart. Well, you know, there is a further information that perhaps they and you should understand, that there's a lot of excitement in neurology as well. This is Professor Longnall.
You had a lecture on the heart. The heart has elegant movement. The brain's kind of boring. It doesn't move. It just sits there. In fact, here are some heart cells grown in tissue culture right here. They beat. That's really cool. And for all of us who have grown cells in tissue culture, including myself, we've put the heart cells in there and you can see them beat. It's really fascinating. You wouldn't expect a brain cell to have any movement like this. However, these are dendrites, and those little things coming off them are spines. And if you asked me as a neurologist to share with you the most powerful vision I have of the brain in my 30 years of neurology, I'm going to share it with you right now, and this is it. This is brain tissue. It moves. Why are those spines moving? Because they're looking to establish new connections. With this imaging technique, we're just looking at the receiving end, the spines. The axons coming in that want to meet with them are not being visualized here, but they're there. Okay? So if a spine is randomly searching around, if it happens to find an incoming axon who's active, that connection can stabilize. If that incoming axon is not active, it's not attractive, we won't have a stable relationship formed. The brain is incredibly dynamic. It's a very much use it or lose it organ. We can look at this as a close-up. Look at this thing. Look at this. This is looped here. We see these connections forming, changing, reaching out, looking for a connection. And if there's an active input coming here, this connection will be stabilized. So we have 100 billion neurons, probably over 100 trillion spines doing this right now. If we can stabilize a long-term memory, this is what's going on in our minds. So my friends in cardiology say the brain is boring because it doesn't move. This is amazing. This is amazing.
So they say neurology is boring and cardiology is exciting. But, well, there we are. Neurology and the brain is exciting. Thank you.